Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. My name is How HR Can Support People with Disability and Special Needs. Our facilitator for today is to share with us from a lot of experience, human resource professional, certified language coach with a strong foundation in administration, education, and people management. She holds a higher national diploma in insurance from Cameroon, where she also completed her secondary and high school education in accounting. She is fluent in English, French, Igbo, Mandarin. Shulamite began her career in 2018 and transitioned into HR in 2021 while working as a tutor at Primal Language Institute, Abuja. There, she managed recruitment, onboarding, training, and documentation. She later joined Lenzo Homes in December 2023, where she established the HR department from ground up, implementing and managing several related processes. Currently, she serves as the HR manager with Footstool Estates Limited. Shulamite is passionate about employee development, inclusive workplaces, and building HR systems that drive organizational excellence. She's also a life coach with children with disabilities and individuals on the autism spectrum, combining empathy with professionalism in all our endeavors. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight on the topic how HR can support people with disability. Mocha, you have the floor, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. You are welcome to today's episode of HR Mentorship Training, how HR can support people with disability and special needs. I would like to start my presentation with a story. Mr. John was a student. He has gone to school with his peers, he aced his exams, and then he has all his certificates. But why does he not have a job? Because he uses a wheelchair. If you were Mr. John, how would you feel being smart, intelligent, resourceful, and then jobless? So today we are going to be looking at cases like Mr. John and what we as HRs can do to handle such cases and bring them into the working society without having to make it inconvenient for either us or them. When we talk about people with disabilities, what do we really mean? People who are living with disabilities could range from those on the wheelchair to visually impaired, to those with hearing disabilities, to those with one or two or three missing limbs. It could also refer to people who are battling life-threatening illnesses. The people around you you know who have sickle cell, the people around you who you know who have cancer, who have autoimmune diseases, who have blood-related illnesses are all people with disabilities. And then we talk about people with special needs. These are people who need additional support to go about their daily activities. For example, that one person you know who has a learning disability is dealing with special needs. Those who are on the spectrum, individuals on the autism spectrum, are people with special needs. Those who have ADHD, diagnosed ADHD, are people with special needs. Those with speech impairments, hearing impairments, intellectual disabilities are all people with special needs. So now, why are we even talking about this? According to the World Health Organization, 15% or over 15% of the world's population are living with disabilities. And up to 80% of these people who are living with disabilities or special needs are out of job. So we go to school, we get certificates, we come back, we sit down at home because the employable world does not welcome us who have disabilities. And then it becomes a challenge. We see them on the streets, we see them in houses, we just see them maybe in restaurants, in cars, and they speak so well, but they are out of job. So it becomes a concern how to handle this population. It's really not about charity. It's not even about customer service. This is a business imperative. So if you're running a business, the skills, the talents that you're looking for are actually somewhere out there. And it can be in someone with a disability or with a special need. So how do we now put them in? Now, before we even answer this question, let's continue our analysis. In Nigeria alone, we have about 15 to 25% of our population living with a disability. In our population, that's about 30 to 50 million people who are living with one disability or the other, or one special need or the other. And again, as we said, disabilities could be visual, it could be auditory, it could be mobility, right? And it could be intellectual or developmental. People are born with disabilities. People have disabilities after accidents. People get sick and then they have this, they like get these disabilities from sickness. People are born with life-threatening diseases or they develop it from one situation or the other. And these people, this population of people who are living with disabilities, some of them find it hard to finish their studies. Some of them have finished their studies and they can't even access healthcare. They cannot get work. And worst of all, the things we say and do in the society stigmatizes and traumatizes these people. So disability it has become imperative that we talk about it because it's no longer unknown. It's something we see everywhere. We see it every day. We know people who are in this situation, in this condition. So it has become imperative that we discuss this. Now, knowing this, there is one more thing, and we HRs talk about it a lot. Organizations talk about it a lot. Inclusion. Why else are we supposed to talk about disabilities? Because if we are talking about diversity and inclusion, it does not just limit itself to religion, it does not just stop with gender, race, tribe, nationality. No, it goes as far as disabilities, it goes as far as special needs. So if we can bring this into our day structures, our diversity, equity, and inclusive structures, it will be a whole, it will be complete. So inclusion centers around talents which people with disabilities have. It centers around compliance, that is legal frameworks that have been built to accommodate, to provide for, and to ease the burden of work on these people living with disabilities. And then there is brand value. Imagine that your organization has employed 3 to 5 people with different disabilities. Those around you, your neighbors, those that live in your vicinity, even online, they see that, oh, you're including these people in everything you're doing. You're posting their results, you're celebrating their wins. The impression that it gives, it's on a whole different level. It gives an impression that is super, super different from the normal, oh, this organization is good, or this organization is growing, they're doing well. No, they will start talking about, so people with disabilities can do this because you're promoting them. Now, let's talk about the legal framework. Talking about compliance. Yes, in Nigeria, we have laws that protect people living with disabilities. And one of such laws is our own very labor law. The Labor Act provides general workplace protections in the form of the salaries that we pay these people, their contracts of employment in terms of those contracts, and it protects them against unfair termination of their employment. People with disabilities, are discussed under equal employment opportunities, where they have as much rights as someone who does not have a disability to everything that is provided in the workplace, and even more. Yeah, and even more. Also, there is a national policy on people living with disabilities, which was published in 1993 and revised in 2021. This law ensures that employment is inclusive. So if you're running an employment program, an employment scheme, it would have to include how these people living with disabilities can be a part of the program. And it promotes workplace accessibility. What do I mean? If I come to your office and let's say I'm using walking aids, am I able to go to the GM's floor? Am I able to go to the media room without having to climb the stairs, look for someone to back me, take me up? That is accessibility, which we'll still discuss in the course of this webinar. There is also the Lagos State Special People's Law. Now, this one is a local law pertaining to a particular region. So it's not just public, the country. You see that local regions also have laws that back people living with disabilities in their state. So, for example, Lagos, the Lagos State Special People's Law guarantees the right of people living with disabilities to public spaces so they can sit anywhere, they can share the garden, they can use the restaurant, they can use the ATM, the fuel station, they can share public transportation, they can go to work just like you and I are going to work. It also provides for the Lagos State Office for Disability Affairs, as LASODA, to enforce compliance with these laws. So if I am living with a disability and I raise an alarm and say this organization I work with is not protecting my rights, they are not doing what they are supposed to do, they are not including me, they don't make me feel included, LASODA takes action against these organizations or the individual who is even complained about. Also, there is the law on discrimination against persons with disabilities. That is the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Act of 2018, which prohibits discrimination in employment. So, according to this law, if you are hiring and a person that has a disability applies, you will not evaluate them on their physical or shortcoming aspects. Yes, you will not qualify them as, oh, this is disabled, we cannot work with this person. No. So it prohibits that. You cannot judge or evaluate people based on their disability. If someone is going to get accommodation, you cannot say, oh, because this person is disabled, they cannot get accommodation. If I want to send my disabled child to a school, the school would not say, oh, your child is disabled, we cannot take them. And if I have a kind of health condition, a hospital does not have to say, because of your health condition, we don't accept such cases. No, it prohibits all of that. And then it mandates accessibility to public spaces again. So people with disabilities and special needs have as much right as you and every other person who does not have a disability to share spaces. And then it puts a mandate for a 5% quota in public organizations. So as a public organization, if you're hiring, 5% of your employees have to be persons living with one disability or the other, one special need or the other, or one kind of. That is a way to make sure that they are found in. It's not just stop with Nigeria. Yes, Nigeria has laws, and yes, Lagos has laws to protect all of us, but it goes further than that. Now let's look at some international laws that protects people who are living with disability. We have the first one, the UN Convention for Rights of People Living with Disability. In this convention, the Article 27 that focuses on work and employment states that people living with disabilities have a right to work. They have a right to equal employment opportunities. They have a right to safe and accessible working conditions. and they have the right to protection against discrimination. So let me not be found in your organization as a person living with a disability and then I am being discriminated against. I can. I can take legal action. That is what this law is saying. Then there is also the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines by the World Wide Web, which was published in 2023. It provides global standards for digital accessibility. So if I'm working in your organization, you know how we use softwares, we use apps to work and all of that. It needs to also be accessible to people living with disabilities. And we are going to discuss this. So it needs to be available to them. I should be able to use the intranet. I should be able to use a software. I should be able to use an app, regardless of whether I am visually able or visually impaired. The third law is the International Labour Organization Convention number 159, which handles vocational rehabilitation and employment. This law ensures that member states, that people who are members, states that are or countries that are members of the International Labour Organization, they need to develop national policies on vocational training, employment opportunities, and workplace inclusion for people living with disabilities. So, in your individual organizations, do you have a policy? Do you have a policy that guides people living with disabilities? Do you have a policy that prohibits discrimination? Do you have a policy that states that, yes, I can employ a person living with and a person living without a disability? Do you have these policies in place? If you do, then you are complying with this law. And then the last two international laws we are going to take are country specific. We have the ADA, that's the American Disabilities Act, and we have the Equality Act of 2010. The first one applies to USA and the second one applies to the UK. And both laws say the same thing, but apply to different states. They insist that disability discrimination is not allowed. It is not allowed. You cannot discriminate against someone living with a disability in employment. You cannot prefer who to render services to. You cannot prefer who to give your houses to or who to take into your schools. No, you cannot do that. And then it also says that employers must provide reasonable accommodations, like we're not saying that, oh, you must give the person living with a disability a house in this context, but you must make changes or room that would welcome and keep these people living with disabilities comfortable. You must make changes and room that keeps them comfortable. If you need to add a pathway for wheelchairs, if you need to maybe take off your stairs, if you need to add railings, if you need to widen your doors, if you need to bring in ergonomical chairs, the ones that accommodate people who have spine injuries, if you need to remove your chairs and make space for wheelchairs, anything at all you need to do, you just have to do it to make sure that if you're hiring someone with a disability, they can survive in your organization and not just survive, they can thrive. So, you see, legally, people living with disabilities are protected. They are protected, and we have been mandated as employers, as HRs, as people who work in organizations or own organizations, maybe, to ensure that these laws are upheld. As much as the document protects them, we need to ensure that we also, from in our actions, we protect them as well. Now, how can we support people living with disability? This is where you and I come in. So let's talk about it. The first thing we need to do is create an inclusive culture. So before you bring someone into your organization, what is the first thing you do? As an HR, I would need to sit down with my management team. and discuss the options that we have open. When I do that, I would now go back, sit down, and create a policy, document the conversations I have had with my management team that supports employing people living with disabilities. One of such is the anti-discriminatory policy. The anti-discriminatory policy provides guidelines and even sanctions for if anybody breaks the rules of the policy or discriminates against people who, in one way or the other, are disabled. It protects them. So you need to create it. When you're done creating it, don't put it in your drawer. When we create these policies, we put them out there for our employees, for our staff, for our colleagues to see. We present it to them. We can discuss it in town hall meetings. We can put it in visual slides or anything that will just make them know that, okay, the organization is trying to welcome people who are not as able as we are. And these are the things that we can do to support them. And also let them know that any kind of discrimination would not be tolerated. And then we need to create something else, an accommodation request process. Now, when you're bringing someone with a disability in, you may not know all the things that they need. So this accommodation request helps every person who has a need to request for facilities that help them work better. So if I need a Braille laptop or a Braille keyboard, I should be able to fill an accommodation request form, issue it, and believe that before 10 days, I would have gotten response and the facility I asked for. So before the end of 48 hours, the HR should be able to respond to me and say, okay, I've seen your request, this is what we're going to do. And before the end of 10 days, I should be able to receive my working facilities just as I have requested. And then when you finish creating these policies as an HR, the next thing you need to do is ensure that every head of department in your organization receives training on how to work with these persons, because it is not HR that will be working with them. Yes, it is the department they are going to. And if it is HR, if they are coming to the HR department, the head of HR will do the work. So you need to ensure that all your managers are trained. You need to ensure that they understand the extent to which someone could be disabled, the extent to which someone could have needs. You need to make sure that they even know the devices for different people and different needs. And even if they don't, ensure that they listen, ensure that they have enough empathy that does not look like pity. Yes, because emotional strength matters a lot when training people on how to handle people with disabilities. They should be empathetic, but not pity them. Okay, so this is the first thing we need to do. Now, after creating an inclusive culture, making sure that everyone in the organization is adjusting to it, and then documenting, the next thing you do is create an inclusive hiring practice, an inclusive hiring process. So what do you do when you want to post your vacancy? Although we are hiring ads, how do you post them? Recently, people use WhatsApp a lot, which is good because not everyone is on LinkedIn. Not everyone is on Jobberman, Indeed, Facebook, and the likes. But people use WhatsApp a lot, which helps because a lot more people are able to see these jobs and apply for them. But if you're going to consider that you want to hire someone who may be visually impaired, after posting your job on WhatsApp, it's not enough. You might want to go the extra mile to create a video job vacancy post. You might want to create something like that. In your job vacancies, you might want to drop the jargons, the legal terms, the HR terms, the technical, just drop them and use simple English. So if you say something like, we require someone who can communicate well, it is more understood than someone who has excellent communication skills. Some of us that have intellectual disabilities will not understand what you said. We require someone who is very good with video editing. Makes sense. We require someone who is proficient. You might even list all those things, and someone who has an intellectual disability knows how to use those software, but may not even catch on because of how you put your sentence. So, in as much as you want to devise accessible job vacancy posts, you might want to use other formats that are not just text. You could use audio visuals, pictures, you could use videos, you could use audios. As long as you want to be inclusive, it would meet different people. And you can use interpretation, for example, sign language. If you're going to create a visual job ad, you might want to also include sign language because it would help a lot. Then the easy English we talked about. Also, you might want to use channels that are accessible to everyone. For example, text messages. For example, WhatsApp, which is being widely used now. For example, to walk-in applications. Because some of these people may only be able to come to your office and drop their CVs. Why not? Can allow that. So you can encourage them. Know that nobody is exempted from applying for this job. Regardless of your health status, your age, your gender, you are allowed to apply for the job, and you can walk in and drop your CV with us, and we would give you a call if you qualify. So you can even add reassuring messages, a reassuring clause to your vacancy ad. It's important you do this as well. Okay, then another inclusive hiring practice is interview accommodations. So we have these organizations that say if we don't see you physically, there will be no interview. You must come to the office. We can make provisions for virtual interviews. We can make provisions for longer sessions. So instead of creating an interview that you create a schedule for 11 o'clock to 11:30, for someone who needs to use Braille to answer a written assessment, you might need to extend that time. As long as you know the needs of the candidates that are coming for your interview, you might need to extend the time. You might need to help them by reading out the assessments. You might need to find someone who knows how to sign properly if you don't know how to use sign language. You might even need to allow them to come with someone who is a shadow. Because for some people living with disabilities, they have shadows or guides. You might need to allow them come with their shadows so that they feel safe, they feel included, they feel welcome in the system, even without being employed. Now, after the hire, when you've sent them letters and said, congratulations, you can resume, what next? So after the hire, we need to do something in our office before these people resume. So if I sent out an offer letter today, and the person is supposed to resume in 1 week, it means within 7 days, I should have made my adjustments. First thing, I need to prepare the physical space. I would have to set up the physical space. So if my office space has stairs, and I know that this person is using walking aids or wheelchairs or anything, what's the first thing I should do? I need to add rails, climb in and out, instead of just having stairs. I might also need to assign someone that would maybe take them in and out of the office every day. Take them in, take them out. If they want to get something, please go with them. Assign someone. It's not so much. Also, accessible walkways. So how are our corridors, our balconies? Are they free? Can people walk on them? If someone is visually impaired and they're using a cane, would they be bumping into things on the walkway? And restrooms, are they easy to find? Are they accessible? does my office have handrails? I need to consider all these things. Then, if there are people who have cars, you need to ensure that their parking spaces are safe and reserved. So if they know that, for example, for people with special needs, they have very strict routines. Imagine that I have to park here today. Tomorrow I come to park here and there is someone. It triggers a reaction that is even unexpected. So we need to ensure that these people have things that belong to them and are for them, and that ownership should be respected. So no employee should park there just because there was no space to park. If it's theirs, let it be reserved for them. That's for the physical space. Now we have digital preparations to also make. You notice that we have an intranet in the office, and maybe we have an LMS that people need to access, and then this person is maybe not able to do so because they are visually impaired, or they are not able to respond because they need sign language to communicate. What do? We need to create platforms that welcome these people, platforms that have maybe screen readers, those that have like text to speech settings. You can activate whatever they are doing on the screen will be read out to them, and then it has a voice button where they can record, they can respond, and communication still remains seamless. If we're going to save documents in Word or PDF, we might need to alternate text for images. So you might need to check, okay, if this person cannot actually read, what can I do to help them understand? Can they understand pictures? People who have special needs and learning disabilities do well with pictures, they do well with videos, and they don't do very well with text, but they do well with videos, they do well with pictures, they do well with cards, they do well with strict, direct processes that are not too complicated or too demanding. So if you know things like this, you can simplify your your digital space for them to be able to use, and then set easier processes. So for your SOP, you created an SOP that has like 7 to 8 pages, and then you want to hire someone with a disability. What is the first thing you will do? Pick your SOP and simplify it. Simplify your SOP, make it easier to understand. You might want to, again, alternate text for images as it works better. You might also want to consider the time that they use to work. So everybody is working 8 to 5, everybody is working 9 to 5, and then you you see that this person cannot stay in the office for that long. What do? You could tell them close earlier. You could also tell them, okay, resume later. You could also give them a few number of hours during which they do not have to come to work. So you can do all this just to make it easier for them. Also, on this slide, we have job redesign. This one is actually very important. So if you're going to hire someone in customer service, for example, and they have a disability, let us say they have an auditory disability, what would you do? Instead of placing them in customer care to make calls, you might want to give them the data entry part of the role. Have you considered that? You might also want to allow them to be the ones gathering and analyzing some kind of information, not just data entry. So make it interesting, but make it simple. My job can be simple and still be very interesting. My job can be redesigned to fit my needs and still be very engaging. So don't just give me a computer and say at the end of every day, just write the number of people who have made calls, the number of people who, and then that's it. It would become boring at some point. So make it that they are always looking forward to it, even though it's simple, even though it does not demand so much, but they can do it and they can be innovative on the job. So these are some things that we can do. to ensure that our hiring practice, our hiring process is inclusive. Before the interview, during interviews, and after interviews, what do you do? Adjustments to do. Now, again, we've talked about the accommodation request. Now, there's an adjustment passport, which is a document where staff record their accommodation needs. It's also like an accommodation request. Someone saying in all your details. I think in most organizations now we call it a biodata form, but we can go ahead to make a specialized one for people with disabilities where they can fill in all that they need to work comfortably. And then we have assistive tech like screen readers, braille keyboards, hearing aids, captioning for meetings. So as we are on a Zoom call or on a Google Meet session, they can see the text on the screen and they don't need to struggle to hear what the other person is saying. Then we have ergonomic chairs that allow for people to sit, relax, and do not feel so much pain in their back, especially for those who have a spinal injury. Then we have communication choices. You might need to choose who works better with written communication, who works better with verbal, who works better with visual or audio. And in some cases, they can work with all, but in different stages or different levels. So you might also need to ascertain this and then always ensure that communication is passed in the way they can best understand and best respond. And finally, we have speedy feedback. So if a request form is sent to the HR department, how long should you take to respond? How long should you take to provide the necessary aids that they need to do their jobs? You would not want to take too long that they start feeling like the company was not ready for me or the company is not able to provide what I need. Also, we have a return to work policy. Now, this could apply to people who may have been employed without disabilities, and then eventually they had an accident. It could be a work accident or not. And then it leaves them disabled, battling for illness, or dealing with special needs. In inviting these people to come back to work, you might want to start by letting them work remotely when they feel better. And then when they have worked remotely successfully, which also means that they will be monitored, their performance will be measured, so you know when to call them back to work. If you're going to call them back to work, don't just tell them you're resuming on Monday or you're working Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. No, it has to be gradual. You might want to start with 2 days a week. You might want to start with 3/4 of the work day, and then full 3 days a week, and then full 4 days a week, and see if you could allow them have a hybrid work arrangement. And even if you're going to give them a full-time on-site work arrangement, you might need to work around a flexible resumption or closing time. So these are the things we can do. Also, we have the National Social Insurance Trust Fund, which makes provision for employees who develop disabilities on the job. Employees who develop disabilities on the job, HRs can work with this plan in mind to ensure that if my employee has a disability on the job, they would still be cared for during to a particular extent or during a particular period of time. They will be fully cared for. They don't need to bother, they don't need to worry about how they will survive. Then we have support services. We can arrange transportation for these ones. Bus pickups or cars, those with mobility issues can get picked up in the morning and dropped off in the evening, especially for companies whose work location or offices are far or within an estate that has no shuttle. You ensure that those that have mobility challenges are picked up, so you do not have to blame them for, oh, you didn't come early or this or that. No, you provide these transportation arrangements and it eradicates the problem that you're going to have eventually. Also, we can offer counseling, especially for people who did not have these disabilities when they started working with us. So if these disabilities happened after a while and then they have to continue working with it, it is only normal that they would feel unwelcomed, they would feel like they're a burden to the company, they might start feeling out of place, and they might end up not being, even if they were a good culture fit before, you see that they fade out. So we need to offer counseling services to these ones to make sure that they cope nicely. They fit into the system again when they resume nicely. And after knowing everything you need to do, would you just start? Okay, let's just dive into it and start, because of course we know all that we need to do. If you are about to change your hiring policies to accommodate people living with disabilities or special needs, you might want to create a plan. I call it a 30, 60, 90-day plan. It's like a circumference for me. It's a 3-month strategy that helps you to know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And it is peculiar to every organization. You might just want to sit down and draft your first steps, as we have discussed, and then what to do next, and how long each one will take. In drafting this, you need to be realistic, because we all know that the decision to include persons living with disabilities or special needs in our workspaces does not just come in a flash. It's a crawl. You have to crawl, you have to be slow, you have to take your time while planning this. There's some noise coming from the background. Thank you. So you want to ensure that you take your first steps and you give yourself time as an HR or as an HR team or anything. You give yourself time to ease into it. So you not just force your management team, say, so, let's start hiring. No, you sit down with them, have the conversation, allow them time to even decide if they need to, so that the decision will be made in good faith and unanimously too. If you create your policies, don't just rush to create and share. No, take your time to create these policies. Ensure that they are legally compliant and that they are easy to understand. Communicate it to your team and then take all the next steps. It could take a while, but it's okay to take a while than that you didn't do it at all. Now, this is a sample of a 90-day integration plan. Within the first 30 days, you might want to start auditing your office. Audit your office to be sure that you have the necessary requirements to accommodate people living with disabilities or special needs or chronic illness. So let me use a typical example of John that we talked about in the beginning. So I mentioned that John had a disability. Now, John was visually impaired. And yes, he went to school. He aced his exams. And then anytime he goes for an interview, he's turned down because he's visually impaired. In fact, he missed a lot of job offers because he wasn't able to read them. So one day, John was listening to his television and then he heard an advert. Company XYZ is looking for, and lo and behold, it was something that John knows how to do very well. To apply, do this, this, this. They dropped their office address, and John went to the office, dropped his CV. He got hired. He came to the office. Now, there was a problem. His office was on the second floor, and there was no elevator. So John has to use 2 flights of stairs to get to his office. And after discussing with the HR department and the management now said, okay, because we have John, we will need to move his office to the ground floor. And they did. And John was able to settle in, come to work, access his office. He was given a braille keyboard, he was given a, a screen reader, he was given everything, he was given documents in braille. He was given a frame, a stylus, and even a soft copy brailler. And he was able to work nicely. So this is what we mean when we say audit your spaces so that nobody feels left out. Draft and publish a simple accommodation guide for employees. Now you have to do this within the first 30 days when you've not even started hiring. Then the 60-day or the second month, you ensure that captions and transcripts for all virtual meetings are set. So if I'm going to be giving someone a system, it should have captions on. It should be able to have apps that transcribe meetings. We have a lot of software that transcribe our meetings. So you could just include one, download, connect, and make sure that it is ready for them to use. Then begin awareness, speak to staff, let them see, remind them. You could do weekly, did you know, or weekly, which part of our policy says. You could do that. And then the 90 days is the integration stage where you have done all the preliminary preparation and then you do your checks, you start your recruitment process, and you take off from there. Make sure that staff know how far you have gone. Okay, make sure that staff know that, okay, this is what we've done so far. Make sure that they know when someone new is joining the system and they know a little bit. You don't need to share too much about the challenge that this person is facing. Okay, we have someone joining our system, he's usually impaired, and we employ you to be the best support you can be. You don't need to say more than that so that people do not get unnecessary information that they might they might unintentionally use to make someone feel uncomfortable. Okay, then there is a very important aspect of inclusion that we do not want to forget, tracking. When you've done everything that you need to do, set KPIs that relate to accommodating and including persons with disabilities and persons with special needs. Set KPIs that apply. It may not be the same in every organization, but we have KPIs that are specifically to ensure that managers are complying with the inclusion policy, that staff, especially those that work directly with this person, are complying with the inclusion policy. We have a few KPIs that we might want to look at. We have the retention, we have like digits and analysis that we might also want to do as HR. For example, retention rates, we need to compare the retention rates between disabled people living with disabilities and those who are not. Compare their retention rates, compare their productivity, and then look at your working conditions and compare as well to make sure that you're getting your facts right. Check your audit score before and after the improvements that you have made. So if at the beginning you saw that, oh, your company was not ready to hire someone with a disability, you now make changes. Before you go ahead to put your vacancy out there and start interviewing, make sure you do another audit that after you've made your changes to be sure that nothing is missing from your bucket list. And then we have the management or recruiter training. Those that will be doing the interviews for these people, they need to know, they need to learn, they need to understand the needs and how to meet them. Those that will be their HODs, their managers, their assistants, anything, just train and keep reminding and keep telling them because it's important that they don't forget. Now we have a case study, two case studies, in fact. In Nigeria, we have the case of MTN Nigeria. MTN Nigeria have been really involved in the lives of people living with disabilities. They had to do, like, they carried out and audits. They implemented hiring support, inclusive workplace design after the audits. They even went as far as hosting an event for people living with disabilities. And those that work with them that have disabilities were able to be projected. People saw, people heard from them and how they are being treated, how they feel at work. They made some adjustments. For example, they installed hearing loops and wheelchairs at key customer service and office locations. In this case, to accommodate their customers and even their staff who have one disability or the other. Then they adjusted the furniture and fittings to be more accessible for employees with mobility challenges. And they trained the HRO and other heads of departments on how to be neutral, how to not have any kind of bias, and how to be inclusive when they are recruiting. And the outcome, they got a structured audit and staff training. And what did it do for them? It turned their policy into a normal life. So they are able to do these things as if it was originally a part of the organization, just because of how effective their integration period was. A second case is the case of Starbucks. Now, Starbucks, the coffee store, they opened a signing store in Washington, D.C. in 2018, I think. And primarily, the staff that they use there are people who are fluent in ASL, American Sign Language. So they ensure that if you're going to come into the store as someone who has a hearing impairment, you would have people who attend to you. In fact, on YouTube, they have videos where their managers were signing simple things like please, thank you, how to order some of their products in sign language, so that even if you want to come into the store, you might want to go watch and learn and practice and just know that you will be welcomed even if you cannot speak or hear. So they did this. Now, some of the things they did, they recruited people who had hearing disabilities and people who could hear but were able to use American Sign Language communication. So they have signages, they have digital screens, they have the American Sign Language visuals. So if you come in and you're not even fluent in American Sign Language, you could follow like the visual aids in store and you will be able to communicate. Then they use the sign language branding and awareness. They keep doing it. So every week they have a sign of the week. What this week, what are we learning and what does it stand for and how can you use this to communicate? They did that. And because they did all of this, they focused on communication needs and it transformed both the workplace functionality and the culture of the company. So from this webinar, we've been able to gather that inclusion does not just cover. We have a lot that we need to do, but we should always realize that those who are living with disabilities, chronic illness, or one form of special needs or the other are as capable as those who are not living with any of these things. They all go to school. So if we can all go to school and make scores, we can also come to the workplace and change the story, change the culture, and we'll still enjoy it if we just do it the right way. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that excellent presentation. Well done, well done, well done. Ladies and gentlemen, do we have questions or comments? Do you want to share experience around this subject? We have a few minutes to quickly take that. Anyone, please be kind enough to raise your hands so that we can recognize you and you can share your contributions or ask your questions as the case may be. I have particularly found this session very enlightening and very, very useful. Adele, you have the floor, sir. Okay. I see Salau,
Oh,
you
sorry.
can speak.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't know I was muted. I didn't know I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Okay, go ahead, Adele. Yes, please. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, yes. Well, I want to say a big thank you to the facilitator for this session. There's something she mentioned, but she glanced over it that I would like to just speak upon. And that is, in situations where there hasn't been any policies or any processes within the workplace that accommodates people living with disabilities, whichever the disability is. And that is the moment you identify the need to have people or persons living with disability work in your organization, the first thing, one of the things that you need to do, if part of the change management, right, is to educate the current people, right? The moment you are going to be moving, whenever there's going to be a paradigm shift from the norm, there needs to be proper education of the existing employees because one, um, you don't want awkward situations between the existing employees and the new people that are coming in. Two, you also want to educate them to know how to handle this type of people. I mean, most times when you see people living with disability on the road, we just pass by them. We don't give them so much recognition like that. But the moment you are in an enclosed space with them, right, you begin to realize, oh, these people exist and these people are beginning to be in my own corner. So these are the things that we need to do: educate, enlighten, right? Train people. The training is usually not going to be a 1 week training, a 2 week training, trust me. Just like she talked about the 90 days for the transition from the norm to the new realities, right? Is within those 3 months that this needs to be done. Sometimes you even do it like drills, just the way we have fire drills in the office. You could have simulation drills for people in your organization that, oh, the moment you see someone with this particular type of disability struggling with XYZ thing, how do you handle it? Right? It becomes a form of training that you keep doing it until you see that there's a pass mark as an organization. Most of the organizations that you see that have the great place to work badges is because things like this are being done in the organizations. Go and check. They have people living with disabilities in the organization, and those are the people that actually raise the bar for them compared to the people that are not living with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. You're actually very correct. And while you were speaking, it came to me to say something. Now, in training people in your organization to know how to deal with, help, and work with people who have these disabilities, we need to also train. We might want to pick a special team of people to train for when there are emergencies. Remember, we've been talking and we've been mentioning people living with chronic illness. If people are having emergency crises, if people have seizures, what's the first thing to do? We need to include this as well. You need to remember to tell them, oh, if there's someone having a seizure, first thing, please don't move them, clear the space, just know what to do, know how to educate people within the transition or the integration phase. You need to make sure that they know what to do in the case of an emergency, who to call, why not to scream or make a fuss. And after the emergency situation is cleared, they need to understand why it should not be spoken about as office gist. It's very important that they know that not everything can be used as an office gist per se. Thank you, sir, for that.
Okay. Salau, please.
Good evening, everyone. So thank you so much for this session. I really enjoyed it. It's quite educative and enlightening. I just wanted to add a few things. Mr. Daly has added some of it. Am I audible, please? Hello?
Yes, please go ahead, please.
Can hear you. Can hear
Okay,
you.
thank you. So I wanted to ask, for LASODA, it's 1% of the workforce.
Yes,
Because
please.
we're talking about, so 5% is for the National Nigeria Disability Act. While for LASODA, it is 1%. You have to employ 1%. That's being said. So also the choice of words, the choice of words used for persons with disability is also very important. Where the HR is insensitive and doesn't use the proper words, it could cause more problems than not. Then also a lot of employers complain of the cost of employing PWDs. For instance, they are talking about having to change the staircase to maybe an elevator or something, having to create a path for wheelchair users and all that. So a lot of employers see this as cost, what's it called? As costly. Yeah, they see. So they rather not employ people with disability, which is also infringing on their rights to employment, and also inclusivity will not take place. So I think for us as HR, our curriculum from school should include something about disability. So that from school, we are taught to accommodate them. When you get to the office and you now meet them, it won't be something that is foreign. So I think we should advocate for disability in our HR curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, you raised a very important point. Now, on how to deal with our employers, right? We know that there are a lot of easier things that have not been implemented. But then it starts with us again as HRs, because I mean, we are here, we are the ones talking about it. We know more than they do, the challenges that have to come with these things. So it's not left for you as an HR, for me, you, and every HR needs to go back, do their research, right? Compare the cost and the benefits. If we are being honest, the benefits are even greater, especially when you find someone, a PWD, who is smart, who is innovative. Most of them are. And they could bring a lot of change. They could bring a lot of brand greatness. But then we need to educate our companies on how to go about it. Remember, during the webinar, I said it's a crawl. You do not expect that all the changes will just happen at once. It cannot be. But if you are I want to use a scenario for a company that is probably in a rented space, and we know that, okay, eventually we are going to move out of a rented space and go to our own building. Once you already have this policy, immediately we start talking about moving to our own building. We need to start considering, okay, if we're going to hire someone that has this or this disability, what kind of building, what kind of facilities are we providing? Again, instead of creating staircases, we could put their offices on the ground floor if it needs that they have to be in the office space to work with us. We could consider that, please, these people cannot climb. So it's preferable if they have a comfy space on the ground floor that would suit them nicely, instead of making the bigger cost, because eventually we will make the bigger cost. But for a start, we can make the smaller ones.
Thank you so much. We'll take our final contributions, comments, or questions for today. Ngozi, you have the floor, ma'am.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Oluyemi, for the amazing session. Well done, Shula. Sorry, I missed the Shula. Yes, Shula. I find the session very fascinating. You know, when we talk about DEI, being inclusive in our organizations, there are some key areas sometimes we tend to overlook. I'm glad that tonight we've looked at it from a very broad perspective, from the policies, from how we can adjust and all of that. So yes, I find it very fascinating. Thank you for this topic. Now, my question goes to data privacy and personal details too. So when for example, you mentioned if somebody has seizure, the person might spend an entire year in the organization and not even experience seizures, especially if the person takes his or her medications, right? So in a situation where you want to enlighten people around that, okay, this so person, it's possible that this person might have seizure, and this is what to do, to support the person if it happens. At what point does it become a data privacy issue that you are spilling a personal information? How do we handle such conversation in the organization?
Okay, that's a good question, ma'am. Now, normally, if I were to educate my staff on how to handle an emergency, I would not be using the case of someone who could have that emergency. Yes, I would not. What I would do, just in case you come across some of our staff, one of our staff who is having a seizure, what do you do? Because if we're even being honest, right, seizures do not pertain to a particular, yes, we know that there are health conditions that come with seizures, but I've also witnessed a case where somebody did not have a health condition, and then just one day out of the blue, they had a seizure. And they had to go and start making findings because it has not been their normal way. It has not been their way of life. I've had someone pass out for the very first time and she's even confused, like, oh, why did I pass out? So I use like general statements, general situations. Again, I can create an identity, like how we used Mr. John this evening. I'm not sure I know any John, but again, I used a John. So you could create a scenario like that and just make sure that the point is, if it ever happens, this is what should be done, and not who it's going to happen to. We are not even looking at that. That's not something they should know. And you also might want to tell them, just again, to protect the information of that person, that seizures do not actually just happen because, oh, someone was born to have seizures. It could be sudden, it could be a result of one thing or the other. But then what's the focus? How we handle the situation. And I have worked with an organization that went as far as making staff sign a non-disclosure agreement to keep everything regarding other staff confidential, especially the HR department. So even if someone had a crisis in the office, again, it is not office gist. And if it is heard that, oh, this person said word on the street, we would have to find the person who started that word on the street and make sure that they are sanctioned for it. So I don't know if that helps.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you to all our colleagues who have also made some input with respect to today's conversation. Again, sometimes I'll just say one or two things, that sometimes other types of disability or difficulty that we may not pay attention to. And sometimes it may not be very obvious. When I say obvious, maybe like somebody's lame or somebody is blind and so on and so forth. So from time to time in our career journey, people may bring certain things to our attention or to the attention of management. And we need to show empathy. We also need to listen. And we also need to be able to make reasonable accommodation. I'll give you one example that we can relate with. I'm 6 feet 7 inches tall. Now, that's not, in quotes, a typical disability. But that height, there are consequences. It's not every, if you are not mindful, I may be hitting my head against walls, beams. If so, if you don't put signages like mind your head, mind your chest. If you look at the typical height of an individual, you may think there's no need to put that. But in one of the best places I've worked, on resumption in that organization, the head of admin, the admin department is separate from the HR department, came to meet me and said, please give us 2 days. We'll get you a special chair. So they gave me a temporary chair. And that is the best chair I have used in any workplace in my life. The lady told me, the head of admin said, because of your height, that the typical chair will not cut it. Because most chairs are designed within a height range. My height range is not in that specific range. And then she gave me a chair with headrest, comfort. I couldn't believe it. So that act alone, of course, I suspect that that chair will not be the same price or cost as the everyday chair, but they did a justification and they got it. And that thoughtfulness came through for me. Somebody may be on the big side, maybe very big. Are you sure that chair is comfortable? I'm just saying, so that we are open-minded and not just think it is for the very direct and obvious cases of disability. But one more thing I also like to say, even for the very obvious cases, I've interacted with some of them. Some of them are my personal friends. I realize they don't like people. They don't. They like to be treated as normally as possible, so that don't, because you want to show back, begin to show too much pity. Some of them actually don't like it. So what you will not do for any normal. So of course, don't assume that anybody with a disability, for example, she's a high super. In fact, we other family members used to say it's like God completed this person with IQ for the left side. Because she didn't have the gift of sight. Shulamite, thank you so much for taking up this challenge this evening and for doing a yeoman's job. Ladies and gentlemen, if there are no other comments, Shula, you have any closing remarks? So we can unmute and say thank you to Shula.
It has been really nice working on this webinar. I learned a whole lot, and I think I see myself in the group as well. So I know how to go about it now.
Okay, thank you so much, Shula.
Thank
you for the insightful presentation, very enlightening, and you have brought the open our eyes to some blind spots that we ordinarily ignore and don't pay much attention to. And to that very tall man that said they had to import his chair from somewhere in the land of the giants. If you come to Ibadan, we will not give you a big chair.